Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the QB List pregame live stream. Here with me today, I've got Erik Smith. Matt had some in-laws visiting. I think in-laws visiting during the fantasy playoffs got to be one of the seven circles of hell, right, Erik?
Yeah, I don't have to worry about that much this year with all the COVID stuff. So I'm hunkered down and preparing for the playoffs. I'm not complaining.
So yeah, we are in the thick of it here. Beginning week for most people of fantasy playoffs. We'll go ahead and start with a lot of the injuries. One of the most recent and bigger names, Brandon Cooks, is out today. Apparently, the story I was reading, he chose himself to sit out, if I'm not mistaken. Let me read this again. I know he had, I think it was a foot issue and a back issue, I believe.
He had a neck thing too. I know they were worried he had a concussion last week, and he didn't get put in the concussion protocol, but he's got a few things going on. So it's kind of crazy. There's nobody left there. Losing Fuller. So it's pretty much down to Kiki QT and Chad Hansen. I don't think anyone knew who Chad Hansen was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, he was like, I think he was the most added receiver a minute ago when I looked. So,
Yeah.
because he had, I think, 7 targets last week and 100 something yards.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, I mean, he's got to throw to somebody. Watson does, and he made it work last week with some no-name receivers. So shoots Kiki QT way up my rankings. Chad Hansen, I suppose you could throw him in the flex in a deeper league. I'd still probably look for better options, but yeah, Watson's good enough that we got to pay attention to these receivers for sure.
Yeah, and I'm a little worried with Watson's depleted weapons because I've got him in 2 or 3 leagues right now. So
Yep.
it's going to be. I mean, they're playing Chicago, so I feel for all the Watson owners out there today.
Yeah.
Also, another guy that I think might pick up some more targets in the offense, probably Jordan Akins.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, if you guys are kind of looking for a tight end to stream, maybe he's your option.
Yep, and then David Johnson's out, so Duke Johnson wasn't very exciting when he was filling in for him, but he's actually seen some passing game work lately, so that's encouraging. And I mean, again, Watson's got to throw to someone. So I know the matchup against Chicago isn't great, but Chicago's defense hasn't been quite the same defense lately. I think their offense is wearing them out here. They can't, I don't know, put up the same effort every week with Trubisky out there on the other side of the ball. So yeah, I don't know. Duke's a pretty solid play. I was pretty down on him early in the year, but with David Johnson out, he's a startable RB2, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, a lot of plays you're going with here volume based. So, I mean, especially with people looking to kind of pick up for Gaskin since he's out. By the way, I read just a moment ago that Myles Gaskin is probably going to miss next week as well. So I don't know if Salvin Ahmed's going to be back, if Matt Breida's going to be back. And they kind of used Lynn Bowden a little bit last week. Who do you think picks up the most, work out of a Dolphins backfield with them out?
They seem to have passed up Breda and Patrick Laird every chance they could. I mean, they picked up DeAndre Washington. I believe they traded for him, but they keep finding people to play above Breda and Laird, so I wouldn't hold out much long-term hope for them. It's DeAndre Washington this week. I think if Ahmad comes back, he's interesting and could battle Washington. He maybe has shown a little more than Washington this year, but yeah, I wouldn't mess with Breda and Laird. It's Washington, Ahmed, Gaskin. Those are the primary ones I want.
Yeah, and then Ahmed's out with a shoulder injury this week, but he could be back next week. So I went ahead and stashed him in a few leagues. I don't know if a lot of you might want to do the same. I think they got New England next week. Not a terrible matchup as far as run defense. So
Right.
DJ Moore he's on the COVID list, so he's out today. They're playing Denver, so Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel could have a decent matchup there.
Yep, Broncos just lost AJ Boye to a suspension, so they are really struggling in the secondary. So yeah, I think it's a great spot. Robbie Anderson should get a ton of targets, and Curtis Samuel's a flex option. I mean, DJ Moore getting out of there is huge, and Teddy Bridgewater's shown he can get the ball to all 3 of those guys. So I would be pretty happy starting any of them this week, especially just with I mean, these rankings are getting halved, it feels like, with all these injuries and COVID situations. So you could do a lot worse than Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, and then Alexander Madison's out for the Vikings, which, he's nothing more than a handcuff, but he's obviously a big name handcuff, the way they use the running back.
Yep.
We don't know if he'll be back next week. Kenny Galladay's out yet again. He's been out all year, it seems. I kind of like – they're playing Green Bay today, so I really don't love anybody in that passing offense. But, Marvin Jones and T.J. Hockenson are likely to pick up the lost targets there.
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Jones has been getting like 12 targets a week lately, so it's not always super efficient with them, and he has to deal with Jair Alexander. So, yeah, I mean, it's not the best matchup, but if things go well with Jones, he'll give you a nice week. I mean, it's just who else are they going to throw to? It's kind of another one of those situations. So we'll see if Swift coming back helps the offense move along, but there's not much beyond Jones and Hockenson, so I'd play them both. I know people get worried about those lockdown corner situations, but if someone's going to get 10 or 12 targets, I'll take my chances with them.
Yeah, and then Denzel Mims is out for the Jets, and they've already got a hobbled Frank Gore, but it looks like he's going to play today. That's just one less weapon for Sam Darnold and the Jets. And they actually have, a good matchup here with the Seattle Seahawks, since they've been pretty much the worst secondary in terms of points given up to receivers. So Rashad Perriman could have a pretty decent day as long as Darnold's got enough time to throw.
Yeah, Crowder is a little iffy. I don't think they've ruled him out. He might play. That would, maybe if it was just Perriman, it'd be a lot more exciting. But yeah, I think he's a big play threat, and they'll probably move the ball some. I do think Seattle's defense has looked a little better lately, but still definitely a matchup you can attack. So yeah, Perriman, trying to find him on my rankings here. I don't have him super high. If Crowder were to miss, I would move him up quite a bit. But Perriman, I got wide receiver 45. But without Crowder, I think he's probably more like 36, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and the Jets receivers were one kind of the guys we talked about last week is having good playoff matchups, which next week I don't think is so great. They get Cleveland in week 16, though, so that's next week they got the Rams, so that's tough. But, Rashad Perriman could be decent down the stretch here if you're clamoring for a last, flex spot or so.
Yeah, because Mims and Perriman and Crowder have all kind of given us production. It's just we don't know who's going to get it lately. So, yeah, the more they whittle it down, probably the better for fantasy for sure.
And then Julio Jones was ruled out, I think, like Wednesday or Thursday. And, I expect Hayden Hurst to pick up some targets, but I think Russell Gage could be a really intriguing play here today against the Chargers. That game is probably, projects as a shootout, and especially with the Chargers. Chargers passing defense has been abysmal, especially compared to last year. So I could see Russell Gage being a very worthy flex option.
Yeah, I mean, you would know better with the Falcons than I would. I mean, I just know when Julio's out, this offense just kind of falls apart. So that's what would worry me with Gage. Chargers are hard for me to figure out. I mean, they looked so bad against the Patriots last week, offense and defense. So are we going to get a shootout, or are they kind of burned from that, and it's going to be a slower-paced game? So this is one of those games I'm having a little trouble figuring out, Falcons-Chargers. I could see it going either way, shootout or maybe a little more like Todd Gurley and Austin Eckler on the ground that we would like. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on just kind of the Falcons' offense, and their defense have been playing a lot better too.
Well, I think Dirk Cutter is really handicapping a lot of what the Falcons could do. They should have had a win last week, and then Dirk Cutter decides to run a toss sweep to Todd Gurley, who was hobbled the whole game on 3rd and 2, loses yardage, and then takes a deep shot to the end zone instead of picking up the first down on 4th. So I don't know. A lot of the Falcons' play calling has been pretty bad, and I think they're leaving a lot of points out there, even with Julio out, because there's been times where, Matt Ryan still looks incredible this year, and the offense is clicking even with him out. So, especially, I think he was out in that Raiders game, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, maybe he was. He got injured during it. But yeah, there's been several times this year where they've not had him and still don't miss a beat with Ridley and Russell Gage.
Right.
Got one question coming in. Tisha Rittenhouse says, Robbie Anderson or Melvin Gordon in the flex?
I'm going to go Robbie Anderson. We kind of mentioned it already, but I love the matchup with no A.J. Boye for Denver. With no DJ Moore, he should get tons of targets. So give me Robbie Anderson. Gordon, I mean, if it's one of those games where they get the running game going, he's great. But if they fall behind, he just kind of loses any fantasy relevance. So I'll take Robbie Anderson here.
Yeah, and I think today I'm saying Robbie Anderson just for the upside.
Yeah.
You know, Carolina's been really bad against the run, so I think Melvin Gordon could have a good day.
Yeah.
So if it was standard, I'd probably go Gordon. If it's PPR, definitely Robbie today.
Yeah, that's fair. And both pretty solid plays. Like you said, Carolina's run defense isn't good.
Last two injuries we really have to hit here is Antonio Gibson left last week's game early with turf toe. Apparently it's pretty severe. You hate to see that because, you know, the last time we saw him, he had, 30 points Thanksgiving Day?
Yep. He was finally breaking out. It was finally happening. That's happened to a few of the rookies this year, it feels like. They either get COVID or they get hurt right when they get the chance.
And J.D. McKissick, you know, if he's out there, pick him up. They're playing the Niners today. I don't expect a huge ceiling from him, but, you know, he gets the checkdowns. Alex Smith is the checkdown king. So if you're in PPR leagues, J.D. McKissick gets the receptions for sure.
Yeah, he's top 20 for me in running backs in PPR. I mean, because it's him and it's Peyton Barber, and I think they're going to find pretty quick that Peyton Barber is just going to give him 2 or 3 yards of carry. So I would expect this to transition more to passing offense, lots of dump downs to McKissick. I mean, he had 10 catches last week with Gibson out. So, yeah, I think he's a really good play, and we'll see. I'm worried they're just going to stubbornly run Peyton Barber 25 times. I'm hoping they don't and they pass it more.
Yeah, and then the last injury we have really is also pretty recent is Leonard Fournette was announced inactive, and it looks like we're finally going to get – looks like Bruce Arians is going to put, you know, his money where his mouth is in terms of Ronald Jones, because he's been saying all year, oh, Ronald Jones should have 20 touches a game, blah, blah, blah. So it looks like – I mean, Ronald Jones has 2 really good matchups. Well, he's got Atlanta next week, and they've actually been a lot better against the run lately, but – this week he's got Minnesota, and then week 16 in the championship he has Detroit, who is the worst in terms of points given up to the running back. So Ronald Jones solidly, you know, could be a league winner here coming down to the last few weeks.
Yeah, I already had him right about RB20 this week. I am literally moving him up as we speak. So he's like a RB13. I mean, he's pretty much a back end RB1. So Minnesota is, they're a little easier to target through the air. So I think there's going to be a lot of passing in this one, but it's still, they can beat him on the ground. And if Rojo's getting all the work, I'd be curious who rotates in behind Ronald Jones, but I don't think it's going to be anyone that takes any work. So yeah, it's looking great for him. Kind of similar to like Akers. All of a sudden he's getting all the work and shoots him up kind of a whole tier of running back.
Yeah, and he's a guy I want to talk about later in our, kind of players stash for the playoffs. Because he's definitely popped off here, and he's probably not available in a lot of leagues. But if he somehow is, spend all the fab you can, because they got the Jets next week. So,
who are we talking? Is that Akers, or are you talking about? Okay,
yeah, Cam Akers.
Man, I didn't realize they had the Jets that week. Yeah, that's perfect. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's out there in a few leagues. I mean, he did have that 21 carry game 2 weeks ago or whatever, but I think he only had like 70 yards. So, yeah, in some shallow leagues, I bet he's out there.
Yeah, and like I told y'all, I had been holding Darrell Henderson all year just because, frustrated owner dropped him, and I saw his playoff schedule, and I was like, okay, I don't even think I played him once. I just had him on the bench for these 3 weeks, and then we get to this, and now Cam Akers is kind of taking it over, and at this point, you can't really, you never know with Sean McVay. He could have Malcolm Brown and Henderson in there taking 15 carries next week, but the way Akers has kind of ascended the last 2 weeks with the carry totals, I don't think you can really start either of the other backs.
No, for sure. It looks like it's Akers until we see otherwise. So, The best news was just Malcolm Brown getting out of the picture. I kind of thought they were going to chop it up between Akers and Henderson once that happened, and it did not happen. It's crazy how quickly McVay switched to just all Akers, but we'll take it if you got him. Perfect timing. I was just catching up on some news. It looks like Andy Isabella's out. Not that that's super relevant. It looks like Randy Bullock is out, the Bengals kicker. I hope you're not starting him, but it looks like they benched him. And then doesn't look like Austin Hooper's going to play. He's got a later game, so we're kind of waiting on that news, but looks like he's out.
So there you go, some breaking news from Erik Smith.
Can't keep up with it all.
Yeah, I'm trying to sit here and look at Schefter's feed and look at some of the, if there's any late breaking. Another thing I wanted to kind of hit on with the COVID, at least, no surprising cases this morning or anything. There was a situation with DeAndre Swift that they were kind of worried about. His test came back invalid, but they tested him again and then ruled him good to go. So luckily Swift, he's back from concussion. It's going to be his first game back. We'll see how he does against Green Bay. They've been pretty bad against running backs. So
yeah, I'm a little worried. I mean, I don't know exactly. I guess he was just sick. We were all kind of worried it was related to that concussion as well. And I hope they give him the full workload first week back because it's a great matchup. But I wouldn't be surprised if they mix him in more, get more Adrian Peterson in there. So it's hard to know how high to rank Swift this week because if it works out, he could have a huge week. But, what if we get 40% of the snaps out of him? That's not going to be that great. So he's a tough one. He's a bit of a dice roll, but I do think the upside is pretty big on Swift.
Yeah, and you really expect him to, be in there. You expect the Lions to be down in this game for, quite a bit. So you would think the passing work, he's certainly going to be in there, hopefully, because AP's, we don't see him as a pass catcher anymore. But he has looked good running the ball. He's really – AP's kind of turned back the clock these last few weeks since Thanksgiving and look pretty decent.
Yeah, if it was a better team, I think you could probably still get some value out of AP on the ground. But yeah, you just can't count on him to win quite enough to, start him. So Swift is definitely the one you want. We'll just see if he goes back to that lead role because he had it right before he got hurt. He was taking over.
So there's not really a whole lot of, as far as I saw, not really any weather-related issues that would hinder any games or performances. So I guess we'll jump to kind of players we like for the playoff stretch. I've got a few here, and I think we talked about some of them last week. Of course, we'll start and say Cam Akers. Cam Akers had 20 in my league Thursday night, and then the week before last, how many do you have last week? 15, I think. So as Eric and I said, they're kind of whittling this backfield down, it seems, to – yeah, he had 16 and then 14 the week before. So he's really done it consistently. Everyone got fooled by Malcolm Brown and Henderson all throughout the year with this backfield. And everyone kept waiting for Akers to, come on. And it looks like down the stretch he's going to be possibly a league winner. I know we were talking about in the Discord, a lot of people said Akers was a little bit of overreaction between him and the Rams defense, and everyone's saying they'd already lost their matchups, and which everyone is going to overreact when it's playoffs and it's Thursday night. You got to stare at that score for a few days.
No, he looks great going forward. Yeah, I was just pointing out. I think he scored like 21 PPR points. You would have thought he put up 45 the way everyone was talking about him. So not a lot of passing game work and no touchdowns. That kind of limited him, but obviously a huge game. He had 80% of the snaps. That's the huge thing we want in this offense. So if he keeps that up, then we're good to go. Week 13, he had, 63% of the snaps. So that number's going up, and as long as he's on the field, he's going to be in a great spot because we know Rams have a good defense and they want to run the ball. So, he's must start going forward for sure.
Yeah, and what's even more surprising is that, the Patriots haven't had a great running defense, but they shut the Chargers down, and you see them pretty much come unglued against the Rams. So it was kind of surprising to see him put up that performance against them.
Yeah, I was worried about the Rams offense. I mean, we saw McVay shut them down, Belichick shut McVay down in the Super Bowl, which I know was a long time ago, but I was not expecting that kind of game. Yeah, I thought it was going to be a lot closer, so that was a surprise for me.
And then while we're on the topic of the Patriots, just do you see Cam Newton starting the rest of the way, or do you see him trying to get Stidham in here and see if he can do?
Man, what's their record at now? I need to see the playoff implications.
I think it was, 6-6 the Thursday, so now it's 6-7, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely look at the playoff implications. They're going to keep fighting until they're out of it, so I would expect they play Cam until they're eliminated. But yeah, I mean, I would think they'd want to get a 2 or 3 game sample if they could of Stidham. But I would guess that if Stidham was the guy, I don't know. I think we would have seen more of him this year. So I would guess that it's either Cam, other quarterback of the future, or someone who's not on the roster. So I don't know how much it helps to get Stidham in, really. I mean, Cam struggled plenty this year. We haven't seen much of Stidham.
And I'll be honest. I mean, Stidham. I didn't watch the rest of his drives, but that for opening drive he had, to be playing the Rams and Aaron Donald in that defense, he looked pretty decent. Getting the ball out on time, making the right reads. So I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of him, but I don't know that Bill Belichick's going to want to go that route yet. Some people have speculated too that they might go after Jimmy Garoppolo after this, because I think the Niners are. I'm not so sure they're not ready to toss in the towel on him.
Yeah, Ben says Bill's being stubborn and he's going to keep playing Cam. I think I agree with that. I mean, it would be hard for me to see Bill Belichick kind of admit defeat and just mail in the season. So as long as they've got a chance, I think they're going to be playing Cam.
Yeah, so, agreed.
And he's got more upside. I mean, I know it's been ugly, but if it does go right, I mean, there's something there. I don't know about Stidham at this point.
I mean, Cam was looking good those first few weeks, and then after COVID, it's like he became it's like he kind of just regressed to the player we saw towards the end of his Carolina tenure. So
yeah, and I mean, not having Edelman's rough, and they don't have much at tight end. That's just same things that Brady was dealing with, but he does not have a good supporting cast for sure.
Another guy wouldn't be great for this week or possibly next week, but week 16 against the Jets, and we just saw him tear up the Titans, is Baker Mayfield. If you're in a league where people are, kind of stashing multiple quarterbacks, and he's still on the waiver wire, you might want to go ahead and grab him. They have the Giants next week, but the Giants have been good in terms of fantasy defense against the quarterback. They play Baltimore this week. But how do you think about Baker and, real life projections? Because I had multiple people texting me, have the Browns finally done it? Is Baker finally, ascended to, superstar level or whatever? And I'm just like, Baker does this every, 3 or 4 weeks, and then he goes back to kind of blowing the game. And
I mean, it's a combination of I'm not sure how great he is, and then just we know how much the team wants to run the ball. So, I mean, they really need a team that's going to cause a shootout for them. Tennessee was a nice matchup because their defense has not been good, and they can put up points. So the Browns had to put up some points of their own. But no, I'm not real high on Baker. I don't think the volume's there. I don't think he's talented enough. And I mean, it's kind of just all play action stuff. And if you don't get those touchdowns most week from him, it's going to be a disappointing game. He doesn't give you anything with his legs. I just don't think there's much upside. So it has to be a really nice matchup. And yeah, like you said, that playoff schedule we've been looking at all year, Giants and Jets, but all of a sudden the Giants have good defense. So that could be just a lot of Nick Chubb and Wayne Gallman and just kind of a slower paced game. So now I'm not very high on Baker. I mean, I think that matchup against the Jets in week 16 would be good. So but I'm not rolling him out there this week or next week against the Giants.
Yeah, and it's more so just stashing him for that possible championship game. Because I know, like, even in one of my leagues, I've got Josh Allen playing New England. I'm not so sure I want to start him that week, even though he just looked incredible against. And he's got Pittsburgh this week as well. Mm-hmm. So Allen's got quite a rough playoff schedule, but it's hard to sit him the way he looked against the Niners.
I'm playing Allen. He's just, I mean, even if they slow down the passing game, he's got his legs to help you out, and he gets those rushing touchdowns. So I think he's a top 10 option about every single week, so I'm not too worried about him.
The other thing interesting about Buffalo is I think it was on the radio the other day. They were talking about the playoff seedings and stuff, and they said depending on what happens here in the next few weeks, Buffalo could be locked into the 3 seed no matter what. So, maybe they sit some starters in Week 16. So just be on the lookout for that. Another person I like here, Kiki Cutie, obviously now with Cooks injured and losing Fuller to suspension. He's a guy that, probably a lot of people picked up last week, but certainly a guy that is worth looking to see if he's on your waiver wire.
Yep. And
today, that the Hansen guy, what's his first name? Chris Hansen?
Chad, I think. Yeah.
So he's another guy that could possibly win you this week.
Yep.
Got one question coming in from Jarensburg 24. Standard League need 2 running backs and 1 flex. Dobbins, Duke, Singletary, DeAndre Washington, Juju.
2 running backs and a flex. I would put Juju in the flex, and then Dobbins and let me get my rankings just to make sure, but I think Dobbins and Duke for me.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Yeah, because, Singletary against the Steelers, he's looked good lately, but, even when he has a good week, he's not scoring touchdowns. So, yeah, and I'm not quite ready to trust DeAndre Washington. So, yeah, give me Duke, Dobbins, and Juju.
Yep, that's I've got the same there. Okay. I don't trust Singletary or anyone in that running game right now. I might next week and that was another player I had on here was Zach Moss, just in case anything happens to Singletary. He was coming on there, and then he kind of fizzled out the last few weeks. But they've got Denver next week, and then New England the last week. Both of those are middle of the road against the run. I think Denver's given up one of the most amount of touchdowns to running backs this season, if I read that correctly.
Yeah, and Moss was out snapping Singletary most weeks until last week, and then Moss fumbled, and it was all Singletary. He got 80% of snaps or something. So I don't know if that's I don't know if that's going to stick or if that was just a 1-game punishment or what. But yeah, Moss, you probably don't want to start him, but he's definitely worth some bench depth, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what a lot of definitely all through the season, but especially right now, hold all those handcuffs. So.
Yeah.
And then another guy who looked awful all year, and then I dropped him, and he kind of starts having a resurgence is T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah.
And they've got a really nice playoff schedule for their wide receivers. He's got the Raiders today. Then he's got, let me look here, the Raiders today and then Houston next week. Now, in the championship game, they have Pittsburgh, which is rough, but for this week and next week, the Raiders and Houston, pretty good. Whether you want to trust him or not off these last 2 weeks, that's up to you. But I don't know. We thought, Michael Pittman was going to be the guy, and then Hilton started getting involved again.
Yeah, I want to be as skeptical as anyone on Hilton, but it's hard. After these last 2 weeks, he's got 110 yards and 81 yards, touchdown each week. So it's hard to fight it too much. And like you said, Las Vegas and Houston, that's as good as it gets. So he's my wide receiver 31 this week. And, once you get below him, you got people like, Antonio Brown, Sterling Shepard, Crowder. It gets a little iffy. So I think he's worth the upside. And he's torched Houston in the past. So maybe he's a little healthier. Maybe he's got his legs under him and we can trust him a little bit. But, yeah, I'm right there with you. I would hate putting him in my lineup, but I don't have him in any teams, I don't think. So I don't have to worry about it.
Mike Nicholas says, do you think this is the end of Leonard Fournette for the season? And do you also think Antonio Brown should soon follow to the bench?
I don't know what they're doing with Fournette. They didn't need to, make him inactive. They just needed to give Ronald Jones 80% of the snaps or 70% or whatever. Are they going to play LaShawn McCoy or Keyshawn Vaughn? I would think Fournette would be back, but I think it's the end of him taking over for Ronald Jones, hopefully. And then Antonio Brown, I don't know. I kind of like their passing game more when they didn't have him around and they could focus on Evans and Godwin. I don't think Brown would take a reduced role, though. I don't think he'd be happy if he was just out there for 30% of the snaps. So I think that's the issue. I think he's going to be out there, but hopefully they'll start funneling more targets to Evans and Godwin because I think they're better players at this stage of their career.
Yeah, and I mean, it was different when Godwin was injured and stuff throughout the season, but now that he's back and
yeah,
the circus, I guess, in terms of the media and all this and the scrutiny that Tampa Bay is getting right now, I think Arians is just kind of over it and trying to get this roster down to the guys he knows can make plays. I could see. Oh, go ahead.
I don't see how though. I still think Fournette's their best backup, and Antonio Brown is their best third receiver. So it's kind of a tricky spot because, yeah, it's kind of managing like the personalities. I think more than anything.
Yeah, and I mean, I could see Fournette being inactive, the next few weeks, but I don't know that he necessarily will be. But I mean, I do think Ronald Jones deserves the lion's share of the. I mean, we know that Ronald Jones is more fluid as a back than Fournette. I mean, I know Fournette was a workhorse in Jacksonville, but that's Jacksonville. He's not a pass catcher.
Yeah, he was catching all those dump offs when they were losing, but he's not your traditional like spread him out wide running back. So, yeah, I wouldn't have got Fournette from the start, and so that probably it's hard for me to answer the question because I just would have never added Fournette and Antonio Brown to the team. I think they have enough playmakers without him. Get Gronk involved, I guess they've lost some depth at tight end, but still, you got enough options there. You don't need to mess with them.
Yeah, and I agree. And I mean, I thought the only reason I thought the Antonio Brown move during the season was decent was because of the injury to Chris Godwin and the depth they lacked, I guess. But I mean, overall, I didn't think it was a great move, especially at that point. Tampa Bay had been pretty successful, so they've certainly slipped, and the Saints are looking like the team, much better team in that division. As much as I hate to say that as a Falcons fan, but. There's really not a team though this year. I don't think that, which is what I love about the NFL is, I think every team has a flaw. I don't think there's one dominant team. As good as the Steelers look, they lost Bud Dupree and lost Devin Bush, and then they just lost that game to Washington. And I think Mike Tomlin and the players kind of said it though. They're glad they lost. They're glad to get it out of their system. I think they're going to come back focused and ready to kind of win all these games down the stretch.
Yeah.
But
my concern with the Steelers is, they don't run the ball very well, which is fine. But they don't have that deep ball going right now. It's just a lot of short stuff. So I think they either got to get the running game going or they got to get Claypool going deep again because right now it's just all dink and dunk and it's not real explosive. So one of the two, either get Connor going or start throwing the ball downfield a little more because it's just it's a slow process on offense. It feels like a lot of the time.
Yeah, and that's the thing about this time of year. If you can't run the ball, it's like, you're definitely at a disadvantage. One thing that was interesting, I was watching that game, I think 2 weeks ago. They said Ben was getting the ball out faster than any quarterback in the league. So that's pretty crazy at his age, and just coming off injury. So maybe they get more, short passes and stuff going out of the backfield, and that's their running game.
Right.
But I really am impressed with Buffalo in terms of the AFC teams. Josh Allen, he's still got some accuracy issues. You see it, but it's not near as bad as last year. And man, someone was comparing it to. They said his accuracy last season was the Stormtrooper, and then this year it's John Wick. So he's been pretty much on this year. But getting back to a few players. A few more players, maybe just one actually, is Naheem Hines. I like him. Even with Jonathan Taylor back and getting involved again, he's had pretty much double digits in PPR every week, I think. Let me see here. 12 last week, 17 the week before. They got Vegas this week, who's fourth at points given up in PPR to running backs, and then next week is Houston. So that's their second in points given up. So I think he still has a role. He's going to get catches and possibly a touchdown for you.
Yeah, nice thing about Hines is he's a little hard to predict, but he's got some upside. So yeah, I agree. He's a nice stash, and He could burn you if it's a Jonathan Taylor week, but we've also seen those weeks where he scores 2 touchdowns and catches 6 passes. So it's nice having a little bit of upside this time of the year instead of just these kind of mediocre backups that are filling in. So, I like Hines too.
And then we'll talk about some DFS plays. I don't know if you've got any playoff players you want to talk about that you liked. You want people to stash before we move on to that, or?
I'll give you a couple, just kind of the opposite end, because I did a column just kind of planning for the playoffs, and I listed some tough schedules. So the Jaguars, once you get past this week, if you have any Jaguars players, you got Baltimore and Chicago. You're probably still playing James Robinson, but DJ Chark, some of those receivers, you probably don't want to play them after this week, so keep an eye on that. Vikings, you're probably not benching most of the players that matters, but they got Tampa Bay, Chicago, and New Orleans. So that's tough. And then, Miami, KC, and New England this next week. That's not a great matchup for a young quarterback. So, just those are a couple tough matchups I'd pointed out. But no, I think you hit most of the good players going forward. And just with as many injuries this week, man, there's not much left on waivers right now. So we might need to wait for some more to pop up after today.
Yeah, and that's the tough part, was trying to find some guys that I thought might still be out there in leagues, and I just kind of went based on what I'm seeing in some of my leagues. But yeah, one thing you said about the Vikings and Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay was one of the hardest secondaries early in the year, and you didn't really want to start your receivers against them, but they've slid all the way down to the bottom 10 now in points given up to receivers. So who knows with that defense? Maybe they'll come together and get it going again. But
and that was kind of their thing from years past. I mean, they really took a jump this year, but in the past you couldn't run on them, but teams just threw like crazy on them. So we're kind of going back to that a little bit. I don't think they have as bad of a secondary as they used to, but still, with nobody trying to run the ball, it just funnels it all to the passing game. So that's really good for players like. I really love Justin Jefferson and Thielen this week. You were talking about DFS. Like, if they can't run the ball, they're gonna have to throw it, and they could have a lot of success here and just have some monster games. So, they're not a bad secondary to attack right now.
And I think Justin Jefferson. I think I saw a graphic the other day. He's in the top 5 fantasy receivers. Or maybe it was in terms of receiving yardage. Not sure.
And he's been incredible. I mean, he's just making big plays and even scoring some touchdowns for you. So I think Thielen's kind of the first option in the red zone, behind Dalvin Cook, obviously. But Jefferson makes enough big plays where he doesn't need to get those red zone targets necessarily. So he's been incredible. I was watching the game. I covered it for What We Saw like 2 weeks ago, one of the Vikings game, and he just is constantly breaking Vikings rookie records, just being mentioned with Randy Moss all the time. So he's having a monster year.
Yeah, and I look back at the beginning of the season when I did the wide receiver rankings preseason, and I had him, I think, as the second or third rookie. And I remember going back just based on opportunity. I wanted so badly to put him above CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Reagor, but of course, those guys should have had the opportunity too. Unfortunately, their offense has just been very bad this year. But, you look at it and you saw the success that Thielen and Diggs had, and it looks like him and Jefferson are going to be able to continue that with Kirk Cousins. So, but yeah, him having this much, kind of matching Randy Moss's rookie totals and stuff, kind of wild. Because I don't think
people were a little worried that he was a slot player in college, and they were worried that him and Thielen would be fighting over that same role, and they weren't sure if he could be an outside receiver or not. And I mean, he's a big play threat outside, so he just it's pretty crazy how quickly he just answered all the questions. Because I was there with you, I wanted to rank him higher. I just thought there was a ton of opportunity because it was literally Thielen and nobody else. So I just kind of got talked out of it because we thought he was a slot receiver, and he's certainly more than that. So. Good to see, and I agree with you. I think Judy and Lamb would have been about as good if their offenses didn't tank like they did.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people didn't have Jefferson. I don't think they thought he was as talented as he is, or as he's shown to be coming out of the draft. But man, yeah, him and Thielen both, I think, are used. Kind of said they get put in that slot. They're slot receivers, but I think they can line up on the outside. I think they're both interchangeable. So, I think that about wraps it up, though, for playoff players. And then we'll talk DFS a little bit. We got 20 minutes till kickoff. Certainly going to give a 5-minute countdown when we get to that point because we got to set. I got to go through my lineups at least 20 more times before I.
Right.
But yeah, so the quarterbacks I like today, especially from a value, I always try to pick these DFS plays on value. I don't know about you, Eric, but Tom Brady 6,900 against the Vikings. I really believe that this week is Tom Brady's pissed, Arians is pissed. I think the whole team wants to make this a get right game. And I think in terms of passing defense, the Vikings have certainly surrendered a lot. And I think Tom Brady, Mike Evans, and Godwin could all have big days.
Yeah, I've been stacking both sides of that game a lot, so I agree. I like Cousins too, stacking him with Thielen and Jefferson. I think it could turn into a shootout, like we talked about earlier. I mean, I do think there's a little worry that the Vikings still try to run the ball a lot and the offense struggles. Cousins is getting sacked, but if this thing turns into a passing shootout, it's just we know who's going to get the passes for the Vikings, so I think it could be a blow up. So, I was looking at Jefferson and Thielen. They've been in all my lineups, so. I'm on board with you in that one. I would take both sides of that matchup.
And then Justin Herbert coming in at $100 cheaper than Brady for $6,800. He's playing the Falcons. Of course, seems like I've suggested quarterbacks against the Falcons every week this year, and it's usually backfired on me. But surely Justin Herbert and that offense has a little bit of a rebound after what they put out last week playing at home here.
Yeah, that was brutal last week. So, you got to be a little brave, I think, throwing him back out there. But he looked so good all the weeks before. He's probably going to be under-owned in tournaments just because of that. So that's probably a good call there playing Jefferson.
And then lastly, I've got Ryan Tannehill, 6,700. They're playing Jacksonville. So that's definitely a matchup to exploit. And, for 6,700, I don't think that's a bad price at all. If you don't want to overspend for quarterbacks, Jacksonville has given up the third most to quarterbacks, I believe. So yeah, definitely somebody who could put up big points for you in DFS.
Yep, I like that one. There are quite a few decent, affordable options this week. I mean, Phillip Rivers against Las Vegas is a nice matchup. He's only at 5,900. Maybe he doesn't have that upside some of them have, but I could see playing him in like a cash lineup or something. So yeah, there's some cheap options this week that I like. I mean, even Taysom Hill, 6,600 in a game where the Eagles are playing Hurts for the first time. They may not move the ball at all. It could be a ton of Taysom Hill on the ground. So I don't think this is a week I would be spending up for quarterbacks. Mahomes is always interesting because you can just stack them with Tyreek Hill and Kelsey, and if they go nuts, then you can pretty much win it just with those three players. And I think they'll be fine against the Dolphins, so maybe they'll be, under rostered. But other than Mahomes, I don't think I'd really spend up this week.
No, agreed. I don't think so.
Maybe Rodgers against Detroit. That's awfully nice, but I think I'd be skipping Wilson, Watson, Murray, those kind of options there.
And then for the running backs, I got, Zeke. I know people don't really want to trust Zeke after what he's only had maybe 12-point games a few times. He's scored 12 or under since Dak left, I think. He's 6,600 today and playing Cincinnati. I know you hate to hear that, but I don't know. He came in this game too with a possible injury, and they're saying he's going to play. And I just like this matchup for him. And plus, Andy Dalton, revenge game. I guess you want to say that, but
yep. I'd be looking. Zeke is the most trustworthy of the Cowboys, so he's a great play. This Bengals team is just without Burrow. This offense is horrible. So Dallas should have the ball a ton, every opportunity in the world to move the ball. And I bet if they get a lead, they're going to want to lean on Elliott. So he could have a monster game. I agree. The offense isn't super exciting, so that kind of puts a damper on it a little bit. He's not up to the same level like Derrick Henry against Jacksonville is, but 6,600 is a good price, so I'd certainly be playing him this week.
Yeah, and then Mike Davis at 6,400 with McCaffrey out and playing Denver is a guy I certainly really like. You know, a few weeks ago, it's interesting because they started mixing in a lot of the other backs. Why, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because they rode Mike Davis like a workhorse for weeks in the regular season, and well, it's still the regular season, but fantasy playoff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he should just be seeing the lion's share, and hopefully that's what happens today. And against Denver, he should have quite a big put out performance here.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if he's wearing down a little bit or something. Maybe he's not used to getting this workload, but it's been a little while since he's had a breakout game. I think he's a pretty safe amount of points here, so he's got a nice floor. We'll see if he can blow up. But yeah, I mean, if Drew Lock's out there turning the ball over 4 times, then he's certainly going to have his chance at touchdowns. So that's a good one. I think there might be some cheaper options, though, that I'd pass on Davis for, but he's definitely a good value for sure.
And then probably the guy I like the most in terms of the running backs, or at least that I listed, is Ronald Jones at 6,100. Now that we know Fournette's not going to play, we just talked about how this game could go. So he's a guy that I would certainly love to put in there at that price point.
Yep. Yeah, and some of the other cheap ones, I mean, I'm not huge on Melvin Gordon, but 5,200 against the Panthers is nice. You got Nyheim Hines down there too. You talked up earlier. Those are two that I like. And then, I mean, Duke Johnson, 4,800. It's more of a usage thing. He's probably not going to put up a huge game, but he's their number one back. That's a good price. And then even, I believe, DeAndre Washington's way down here. I'm not super high on him, but yeah, DeAndre Washington's 4,000. So if you need a minimum price running back, there he is playing against the Chiefs. But teams can run on the Chiefs, so maybe you'll get a nice value out of him. You can pay up for Derrick Henry and whoever else we want this week.
And I will say Washington, I had a few people text me whether he was a good start today. Kind of scares me a little bit because I do think they may mix in Laird and Lynn Bowden Jr. In the passing game and stuff. So
yeah.
We got a question here. He says, afternoon, with Gibson out, Akers on my bench, and Gaskin with COVID, I need a flex standard. Pick one, DeAndre Washington, Phillip Lindsay, Jeff Wilson Jr., or Pittman.
I'd go DeAndre Washington. There's, like I've said, there's reasons to be concerned about him, but he sure seems like he's going to be their primary running back, and that's more than you can say about the others. So I'd go with Washington. Hopefully they can stay in it long enough to give him some carries, get a touchdown out of him. But I think I'd probably rather start Pittman over the rest of those running backs, so it'd be Washington than Pittman for me.
Yeah, and I'm actually going Pittman as my start over all of them, even in standard. I don't know, man. I don't trust Washington, and I like Pittman's matchup better than any of these other guys. That is awful, though, the Akers to have that on your bench. But, I mean, I understand it's, we talked about that backfield's been a carousel all year, and they were playing the Patriots, so –
yeah, and Gibson and Gaskin have been good. So, yeah, I think a few people ended up with Akers on their bench this week, and it's yeah, it's rough.
I didn't really like a whole lot of the wide receivers. I don't know. You tell me if there's a few guys you like better, but we talked about Tannehill. Corey Davis is 5,700 playing Jacksonville. I think Tannehill and a Corey Davis stack might be sneaky this week.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been hammering Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Let's see, Mike Evans. I like that game from a passing perspective. Godwin's pretty cheap. I think Robbie Anderson at 6,200 is pretty nice with DJ Moore out. And then Curtis Samuel at 5,200. Those are a couple of the matchups I'm attacking. I just think that Denver secondary without Boye is a good matchup. So, but I mean, Kiki QT's down there at 5,000. He's the lead receiver now, apparently. So there's a decent amount of options. I mean, if you said you liked Gage earlier, he's only 4,500. I could see like Laviska Shenault having a decent game against Tennessee if you were going for like a tournament play. He's only 4,100. So yeah, receiver's tough. There's just so many different options. It kind of comes down to how much room you have left in your, or how much money you have left in your roster, and who you're stacking with. So that kind of sets it for me most weeks.
I think we got one other or a few questions coming in. So Mike says, speaking of wide receiver, where does Kiki QT rank this week for you? With Cooks and Fuller out.
So I moved him up. I was pretty skeptical before Cooks was out. I just wasn't ready to trust QT after 1 week, even though we've liked him in the past. But I moved him up to wide receiver 22 this week. I mean, they got to throw to someone. So, yeah, I like him this week. Let's see what the Fantasy Pros consensus is. Looks like the consensus is about 31, so I'm higher than him. But I bet a lot of people haven't bumped him up the rankings since Cooks went out. So, yeah, I like him. I mean, I know the Bears are tough, but I think you just got to take your chances with QT this week because he's a primary receiver, and he should get a ton of work.
Agreed.
Trying to see where I put Hansen.
Yeah, I
still got him in the 50s. So, but I think you could start him if you needed to.
Yeah, I mean, with the news, I'm up. You could see him bumped up to maybe the 40s or late 30s, but
yeah, I mean, would you rather play? I mean, like Christian Kirk has been so bad lately. Would you rather play Hansen over someone like him?
I don't know because with that they're playing the Giants today, right?
Yeah.
It's tough because Chicago's been I don't know where Hansen generally lines up, but I think QT is usually a slot guy, if I'm not mistaken. A lot receivers have really struggled against guys that line up outside.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I worry so much today about that offense against Chicago. I know Chicago's defense hadn't been what it usually is, but
yeah,
in terms of passing, I worry about Watson and these receivers.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, with David Johnson out, I don't know if they're going to give Duke Johnson 25 carries. So I think they're going to have to pass it. I don't know if we see a lot of two tight end, a lot of Akins, a lot of passes to Duke. But I just, if they're going to get into a shootout because their defense is terrible. So I just think there's a decent amount of upside here regardless of how they want to play it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It is a tough one. I'll be interested to watch that game.
One other receiver I had on here, Marquise Brown. I mean, he's 5,400, and you never know. He's kind of a boom or bust guy, but playing Cleveland, not a great secondary. He had a few good plays last week, and for 5,400, I mean, I'll take Marquise Brown.
Yeah, he's been. I just closed out DraftKings. He's been up and down. I mean, but he's got the touchdowns lately, so. I guess I just worry. I mean, does he really have that like monster game in him right now? I could see 75 yards and a touchdown, but I don't know. Maybe we'll see one of those games from last year where he lights the world on fire. But I'm kind of down on Brown. So even with the last 2 weeks, but I get it. I mean, he's got big playability.
Yeah. And then in terms of tight ends, if you don't want to pay up for most of the time, it's worth it to pay up for Kelsey or Waller, but. Hawkins at 5,000, Mike Gesicki at 4,500, playing the Chiefs. Those are two guys that are decent. If you don't want to spend the top dollar for Kelsey and Waller.
Yeah, like we were talking about just a minute ago with Akins. If you're really looking to go cheap, Akins is way down there. I think he's like 2,900. Yeah, or even someone like Cole Kmet. He's been getting more work over Jimmy Graham lately. Those are a couple of like the punt options I like. He's at 2,900. But yeah, I mean, it's other than that, I would probably spend up, like you said. I think Ebron against Buffalo is pretty nice. 4,600 is a reasonable price. He's been good. Buffalo's defense hasn't been that great against the pass. So those would be a few I'm looking at. But I tend to either go, like you said, for Kelsey or I just punt the position generally.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're doing a stack, maybe if you're playing Rodgers and Adams, you throw Tanyan in there. But that's usually how I decide it.
And then last but not least, the two defenses I like the most this week, Seattle at 3,000, the Panthers at 2,900. Seattle playing the Jets and Panthers playing Denver. I think they're like 1 and 2 in terms of points given up to defenses this year. So,
yeah, Dallas at 2,400 is interesting. I know they're terrible, but they're playing the Bengals. Brandon Allen has not looked good, so that's probably as cheap as I would go is Dallas. I like those ones you mentioned. I do also like, who is it this week? I think Washington against San Francisco is not bad. I mean, it's Shanahan. He's pretty, he's obviously a great coordinator, so that kind of maybe takes some of the ceiling off of it. But Washington can get after the quarterback. They should have a nice week.
Agreed. We're getting into that 5-minute mark here.
Yeah.
Eric and I are going to run through our lineups. If you guys want to shoot us some questions, some last-minute lineup advice here.
I think all my leagues are set, so
well,
definitely whittled down a little bit with, missing the playoffs in a couple leagues. So
I mean, I definitely looked at them, like a lot yesterday, and I'm still – I think they're pretty much set. There's not really – you hate to start getting into the last-minute tinkering because it usually costs you.
Yeah, that always burdens me. It seems like it's always Thursday night that gets me. I'll leave someone on the bench who blows up or play someone who gets 0 points. So Thursdays kill me. I wish we could just skip Thursday night football some weeks.
Yeah, I was real bad about this year about just like throwing guys in on Thursdays just to have someone to watch last minute, and then like one week I threw in like Chris Herndon and it almost cost me.
So I'm down to I'm one of the last 4 teams in our guillotine league.
Mm-hmm.
So our lineups are loaded. Would you rather start Tyler Lockett against the Jets or Allen Robinson against the Texans?
Ooh.
It's hard when you get loaded teams in guillotine league. It's you don't have to deal with these issues.
Man, I almost want to say. I
almost want to lock it in right now, but
what I was going to say is like I almost want to say him just because maybe they'll run the ball a ton and Metcalf will just be dominant if they use any receiver.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I figured if I start Lockett, they got Russell Wilson. That's better than Robinson with Trubisky. So that was kind of the tiebreaker for me. But I don't know.
I'm trying to decide if I want to. 110-team league I'm in. Zeke's on my bench, and I would either have to sit Allen Robinson, Mike Evans, or Chubb to put him in. I just don't think it's. I think the upside. I mean, Chubb against Baltimore I don't love, but the way he's been playing. And the way Zeke ran on Baltimore last week, I don't think I can sit Chubb for Zeke.
No, I'd have Chubb out there. Colin Weatherwax just messaged me, pick one, Marvin Jones, QT, or Nyheim Hines, PPR league. Is that Kiki? Yeah, it's got to be QT, Hines, or Jones. I think it's QT, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I love Hines, but I mean, with no Cooks and stuff, I think you got to go QT for this one.
Yeah, we like him over Marvin Jones, right? Just because that Jair Alexander matchup.
Yeah, I don't love Marvin Jones this week or really anyone besides the running backs for Detroit.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I try not to let matchups sometimes.
I know, and I have a bad habit of, especially on like Yahoo, because I show you the green and red. And, yeah.
Or they show you the point projections, and you're like, well, I can't leave the guy with a higher projection on the bench,
And I was telling someone, in my league last night, at this point in the season, it's almost like you got to just throw the matchups out the window, start your stud, and start the guys with the volume.
Yeah.
You can't really get cute and, sit people just based on matchups, even if you don't like them, But,
now that's usually my downfall. I'll stick with the start your stud strategy. So I'd rather lose that way playing them as opposed to putting in DeAndre Washington over over I don't even know who, but
like last week, I mean, I had already kind of locked my seat up, and I sat Kamara because he had not been playing well with Taysom Hill, and then he had like 20 points or something. So yeah, I would definitely rather lose with. A guy I didn't trust on my bench going off than my stud going off and me not playing him.
Yep. All right. Well, I got to cover this Bengals-Cowboys game for what we saw. So I've got an exciting afternoon ahead of me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on with me, Eric. Thanks for covering all these weeks.
No problem.
When Matt's not been able to be on, and guys, Erik runs our site. He's behind the scenes doing it all and does our weekly rankings and everything. Plus, look out also for our sit start. It comes out on Thursdays. Got a few more weeks left of the season. Really critical to get that lineup advice. So, thanks, Erik, and let's go watch some Red Zone.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Have a good day.
You too. I'll see you.
Yep. See you guys.